I stared at the FBI agents sitting across from me, their recording device blinking red between us. "Ms. Moore," Agent Chen said, sliding a thick folder across the table, "your documentation just brought down one of Silicon Valley's biggest unicorns. But first, tell us about the day you decided to record everything." "My name is Jessica Moore. I'm 28 years old, and 2 years ago I thought I'd landed my dream job at Technova Solutions, a software developer working on medical technology that could actually save lives. That's what got me up every morning with genuine excitement. The company felt different from other tech places I'd worked. Everyone talked about mission and purpose. We weren't just building another app to sell ads or get people addicted to their phones. Our healthcare software was going to help doctors make better decisions faster, real impact stuff. I remember walking into the office on my first day, seeing the sleek workstations and the motivational posters about changing the world. My team seemed solid too, smart developers, passionate about the work, and then there was Kevin Martinez, my team lead. Kevin was 35, technically brilliant, and had been with Technova for 4 years. He knew the codebase inside and out. During my first week, he made what seemed like harmless comments about how nice it was to have someone who dressed professionally on the team. I figured he was just being friendly. But then the comments got weird. He'd walk by my desk and mention how my attention to detail must come from being a woman. Not exactly a compliment, but not worth making a scene over either. I told myself he probably meant well. Maybe he just had poor social skills. The real problem started during code reviews. Kevin would question my work in ways that felt different from how he treated the guys. He'd ask if I was sure about that logic or suggest I double-check my assumptions. Meanwhile, when male developers submitted code with actual bugs, he'd brush it off as minor oversights. Then there's the meeting incident that changed everything. I'd spent 3 weeks developing a breakthrough algorithm for processing patient data faster. The solution was elegant, efficient, and could potentially speed up diagnoses by 30%. I was excited to present it to the broader engineering team. Kevin sat next to me during the presentation. Every few minutes, he'd interrupt with comments like, "Jessica's been working really hard on this," in a tone that made it sound like effort was more notable than results. When I explained the technical details, he'd nod and say things like, "She's really gotten the hang of this." But here's where it gets infuriating. The next week, Kevin presented my algorithm to the VP of Engineering as part of his quarterly review. He called it a team breakthrough and took full credit for the technical approach. I found out because Sarah from the QA team mentioned how impressed everyone was with Kevin's innovative solution. That night, I went home and started writing everything down: dates, times, exact quotes. My background in computer science had taught me to be methodical, and suddenly I was applying that same systematic thinking to workplace harassment. The documentation started as self-protection, just covering my bases in case Kevin's behavior escalated. I wasn't thinking about lawsuits or HR complaints. I was thinking about survival. Well, Kevin's behavior did escalate. He began making jokes about women in tech during team meetings. "Jessica probably chose that programming language because it's more intuitive," he'd say. Like intuition was somehow inferior to logic. When I'd push back on technical decisions, he'd smile and tell the room that diversity of thought was valuable, even when it slowed things down. The breaking point came during our monthly all-hands meeting. Kevin was presenting the team's progress, highlighting the patient data algorithm. Again, my work, his credit. But this time, when the CTO asked technical questions, Kevin stumbled. I jumped in to answer, explaining the implementation details Kevin couldn't. The room got quiet. Kevin's face turned red. After the meeting, he cornered me by the coffee machine. "Next time, let me handle the technical explanations," he said. "It looks bad when team members contradict their lead." That's when I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. The systematic harassment, the stolen credit, the undermining, it all had to stop. Little did I know, filing that HR complaint would uncover something much bigger than workplace harassment. I walked into the HR office thinking I was doing the right thing. Professional complaint, documented evidence, clear examples of harassment. Simple fix, right? Wrong. The HR director, Linda Walsh, sat across from me with this practiced smile that screamed, corporate damage control. She had my complaint printed out, but I noticed something weird immediately. She kept flipping through other papers while I talked, like she was comparing notes. "Jessica, thank you for bringing this to our attention," Linda said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "However, we've received some feedback about your collaborative approach lately." Wait, what? I hadn't even finished explaining Kevin's behavior and suddenly we're talking about my collaboration skills. This felt like being pulled over for speeding and having the cop ask why you hate America. "I'm sorry, but what feedback?" I asked. "From who?" Linda shuffled her papers again. "Well, several team members have mentioned you can be challenging in meetings, sometimes argumentative." The gaslighting was so obvious it was almost insulting. But here's where my documentation habit paid off. I'd recorded the dates and attendees of every meeting for the past 6 months. I knew exactly who was in each room and what was discussed. "Could you be more specific about which meetings?" I asked. "Because I have detailed notes." Linda's smile faltered for about half a second. Then she recovered with corporate speak about creating a harmonious work environment and addressing all perspectives. That's when I realized what was happening. They weren't investigating Kevin, they were building a case against me. I left that meeting knowing I was screwed, but I also left with something valuable: clarity. This wasn't about one creepy team lead making inappropriate comments. This was systematic. Let me tell you what I discovered over the next few weeks. Technova had a pattern. Women would join with great enthusiasm, face harassment, report it to HR, then suddenly develop performance issues or attitude problems. Within 6 months, they'd either quit or get fired. The documentation I'd been keeping defensively? I shifted it into investigative mode. I started paying attention to conversations happening around me. In my state, single-party consent laws meant I could legally record any conversation I was part of. So I did. Every meeting, every hallway interaction, every casual check-in with HR. The results were incredible and horrifying. HR wasn't just ignoring harassment complaints, they were actively coaching managers on how to build termination cases against women who complained. Linda had this whole system for documenting collaboration issues and cultural fit problems that would justify firing anyone who became a problem. Then there's the pattern I noticed with other women at the company. Remember Sarah from QA I mentioned earlier? She'd been there 3 years, consistently top-rated performance reviews, never missed deadlines. But after she complained about her manager making comments about her pregnancy, suddenly her work quality became inconsistent. She quit before they could fire her. Marketing had the same story. Engineering had the same story. Customer success, same story. But the really crazy part? I discovered this wasn't just evil HR behavior. It was connected to something much bigger. Technova published annual workplace culture reports for investors, beautiful documents full of diversity statistics, harassment incident numbers, and employee satisfaction scores. These reports directly influenced investment decisions worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Well, those numbers were complete fiction. The company reported having received only 3 harassment complaints in the previous 2 years. I personally knew of 12. They claimed a 94% employee satisfaction rate among women. Half the women I'd talked to were actively job hunting. This wasn't just workplace harassment anymore. This was securities fraud. Companies use environmental, social, and governance metrics, ESG scores, to attract investment. Pension funds, university endowments, socially conscious investors all make decisions based on these reports. Technova was lying to get money. While I was uncovering this massive fraud, my own situation kept getting worse. Kevin started assigning me to projects that were either impossible deadlines or complete dead ends. When I'd ask for clarification or pushback on unrealistic timelines, he'd CC HR on his responses about my resistance to feedback. The trap was beautiful in its simplicity. Make the job impossible. Document every attempt to make it possible as insubordination, then fire for poor performance and bad attitude. But I was building my own case. Every impossible deadline request recorded. Every meeting where Kevin undermined my work, documented with audio. Every time HR asked leading questions designed to get me to say something fireable, captured word for word. I also started researching whistleblower protections. Turns out documenting securities fraud makes you a protected class of employee. Companies can't retaliate against you for reporting financial crimes to federal agencies. The beautiful irony? By building their case against me, Teknova was actually creating evidence of the retaliation I'd need to prove their fraud. Then came the meeting that sealed everything. Linda scheduled what she called a mediation session between Kevin and me. Professional conflict resolution, she said, a chance to clear the air and move forward productively. I knew it was an ambush, but I also knew it was my opportunity to get everything on record. The meeting was Kevin, Linda, and 2 other HR representatives in a conference room. They had prepared talking points. This was clearly rehearsed. Kevin started with this fake apology about communication styles and how he wanted to better support my professional development. Meanwhile, Linda kept asking me questions designed to make me sound angry or unreasonable. "Jessica, do you feel Kevin has been deliberately trying to undermine your work?" she asked. Think about that question. Answer yes, you sound paranoid and difficult to work with. Answer no, you're admitting your complaint was baseless. I answered carefully, sticking to documented facts and specific examples. But they kept pushing, trying to get an emotional response they could use against me. The whole thing was recorded on my phone in my pocket. 2 weeks later, they fired me. The official reason was inability to work collaboratively with team leadership and pattern of negative attitude toward constructive feedback. They walked me out immediately. No transition time, no chance to say goodbye to colleagues. But here's what they didn't know. I'd been preparing for this moment for months. All my evidence was stored safely off-site. I'd already made initial contact with federal agencies, and I documented every step of their retaliation campaign in real time. They thought they were getting rid of a problem employee. Instead, they'd just created a federal whistleblower case that would expose the biggest corporate fraud scandal Silicon Valley had seen in years. The real investigation was just beginning. Walking out of Teknova with a cardboard box felt like the end of my career. But it was actually the beginning of theirs ending. See, they made one crucial mistake. They assumed I'd disappear quietly like all the other women before me, file for unemployment, maybe complain to friends, eventually move on. That's how their system worked for years. They didn't count on me having federal agencies on speed dial. 3 days after my termination, I filed simultaneous complaints with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Department of Labor. Each agency got a different piece of the puzzle, but together they painted a picture of systematic fraud that went way beyond workplace harassment. The EEOC got my discrimination case with 6 months of recorded conversations. The SEC got evidence of falsified workplace culture reports used to secure investments. The Department of Labor got documentation of retaliation against protected whistleblowing activity. My methodical nature finally paid off. Every meeting, every email, every suspicious interaction was time-stamped and cross-referenced. I'd accidentally built the most comprehensive case file these agencies had seen. Then the fun started. Within 2 weeks, federal investigators were knocking on Teknova's door with search warrants, not the friendly corporate compliance visits companies usually get. Full-scale criminal investigation with boxes of evidence being carried out in front of news cameras. The SEC forensic accountants found something beautiful. Remember those fake workplace culture reports I mentioned? Technova had been using them to qualify for ESG-focused investment funds worth over $800 million. Pension funds, university endowments, socially responsible investment portfolios, all making decisions based on completely fabricated data. But here's where it gets really interesting. The investigators discovered Technova wasn't just lying about harassment statistics. They were falsifying safety compliance data for their medical software, inflating user satisfaction scores, and misrepresenting their diversity hiring numbers to qualify for government contracts. My harassment complaint had uncovered a multi-billion-dollar fraud operation. The corporate panic was immediate and hilarious. Linda from HR suddenly developed a mysterious illness that required extended medical leave. Kevin got reassigned to a special project that conveniently had no contact with other employees. The CEO started hiring crisis management firms faster than I used to fix his buggy code. Internal emails started leaking to the press, and guess what those emails revealed? Executive leadership knew about the harassment cover-up system all along. They'd created it deliberately to avoid bad publicity that might hurt investment prospects. One email from the CEO literally said, "We can't afford another harassment scandal before the Series C funding round. HR needs to handle these situations more proactively." By proactively, he meant silence victims and fabricate reports. The dominoes kept falling. Other women who'd been forced out started coming forward with their own documentation. Turns out I wasn't the only one recording conversations and saving emails. We'd all been building cases independently, and now federal investigators had a pattern spanning 5 years. Kevin got arrested first. Criminal charges for sexual harassment under federal civil rights law plus conspiracy to commit securities fraud. Watching him get perp-walked out of the office building felt better than any performance review I'd ever received. Then came Linda and 3 other HR executives. Then the C-suite. The CEO, CFO, and general counsel all facing federal fraud charges that could mean decades in prison. My wrongful termination lawsuit became the least of their problems, but it still resulted in a settlement that paid off my student loans and bought me a really nice car. More importantly, it established legal precedent for other whistleblowers facing similar retaliation. The ripple effects went industry-wide. New SEC regulations now require independent third-party verification of workplace culture metrics used in investment decisions. The Department of Labor created stronger protections for employees reporting ESG fraud. As for me, well, recording those conversations didn't just save my career, it launched a better one. Tech companies started reaching out, wanting someone with proven integrity to lead their compliance programs. But Agent Chen here knows the story gets even crazier, because Technova's fraud was just the tip of the iceberg. Looking back at Agent Chen across that table, I realized my little documentation hobby had accidentally unraveled the biggest corporate fraud case in Silicon Valley history. But the story doesn't end with Technova's executives in handcuffs. Turns out their fake ESG reporting system was being used by dozens of other companies. The investigation I started became a federal task force examining systematic fraud across the entire tech industry. My recordings didn't just bring down one company, they exposed an entire ecosystem of lies. The personal cost was real, don't get me wrong. Months of stress, sleepless nights wondering if I'd made the right choice, watching my bank account shrink while lawyers fought over settlements. There were days I questioned everything, wondering if staying quiet might have been easier. But then I'd remember Sarah from QA, forced to quit while pregnant because she dared to complain, or the other women who'd been systematically pushed out, their careers damaged for refusing to tolerate harassment. Someone had to break the cycle. The vindication felt incredible. Not just the settlement money, though that was nice. The real victory was watching Linda from HR try to explain her proactive harassment management system to a federal judge. Turns out corporate doublespeak doesn't work so well under oath. Kevin got 18 months in federal prison plus 5 years probation. The CEO got 7 years. Linda got 4. The whole executive team that orchestrated this fraud machine ended up with criminal records and massive financial penalties. My new job is actually better than Technova ever was. I'm heading up ethics and compliance for a medical device company that actually lives up to its mission statement. Amazing what happens when leadership isn't actively covering up crimes. The industry changes have been substantial. Independent auditing of workplace culture reports is now standard. Whistleblower protections got strengthened. ESG fraud carries serious criminal penalties that executives actually fear. But here's what I'm proudest of. 3 other women have contacted me this year about similar situations at their companies. I help them document everything properly, connect with the right federal agencies, and protect themselves legally. The system I accidentally developed is being used to expose fraud across multiple industries. Recording those conversations saved my career, sure, but more importantly, it helped build a framework for holding corporate power accountable when they think they're untouchable. Sometimes one person with a smartphone and the determination to document everything can bring down billion-dollar fraud operations. Kevin certainly never saw that coming.